I switched from the iPhone 15 Pro Max, the latest iPhone that you can buy, down to the iPhone XS Max, and I wanted to see how it would hold up in 2024. Is this a phone that still remains competitive today? Does the camera quality still hold up? And is it worth buying this over other newer options like the iPhone 11, 12, 13, 14, or 15 Pro Max? A lot of people will tell you to buy the latest iPhone to stay current with the times, but I take a different approach, where I feel like you don't need the latest tech. Starting with my journey switching from the latest iPhone down to the 13 mini, I found that it actually did enough to keep up with any of the iPhones that I've tested. And since then, I've tested older phones to prove that you don't need the latest tech to have a great iPhone experience. Even Apple published a report with their plan to support older iPhones for longer in an approach to be more sustainable, and that means that you shouldn't need to upgrade as often. And when you do, it doesn't always have to be the latest iPhone. The iPhone XS Max was originally released in September 2018 running iOS 12. It came with exciting new features like improved, faster Face ID, wider stereo surround, and a beautiful new gold finish that looks incredible. It was also the first iPhone to introduce dual SIM functionality, and it included the A12 Bionic chip, which is the same chip that's currently in the iPad mini 5th gen and the Apple TV 4K 2nd gen. And it's no coincidence that I picked this phone to switch to. With Apple's iOS 18 update coming out, they've revealed that the XS Max is the oldest Max-size iPhone to support iOS 18, meaning it's the oldest phone that you can get that Apple deems fit to use the latest features, and I wanted to see if it really held up in 2024. It's obviously dated, but there's something beautiful about the design of this phone. In a world where we're used to these flat-edged phones, and they all look exactly the same, there's something unique about the rounded edges that seamlessly blend in with a beautiful OLED display with Dolby Vision and HDR10 support. There's this sort of champagne back color of the phone, and it all comes together in this phone that's 6 years old, yet feels in line with current gen smartphones. But is it? The XS Max isn't that far off of the design of current iPhones. It has a notch where you're used to seeing the dynamic island. It has a rounded screen and roundless stainless steel edges where we now have flat titanium. The back is solid glass and glossy, which looks incredible, and overall thinner and lighter, and it's really comfortable to hold compared to the current Pro Max. The XS Max has a notch with Face ID, which is a lot faster than the previous models when it launched, and it is really nice to use even today with these updated sensors on the front. But then you've got all the headline features that we take for granted now, but were introduced on this phone. I actually went back and watched the keynote again when I picked up this phone, just as a refresher to see what was new and exciting when this came out. Well, first you've got Animoji, which was new at the time and really fun to use with Face ID to track all of your movements. Entertainment actually looks great because this is an OLED display, which surprised me for an iPhone this old. The A12 Bionic chip is actually great for light to moderate gaming, even with current games that I'm playing on Apple Arcade. And surprisingly, the camera, pretty decent. The two cameras are 12 megapixel wide angle and telephoto cameras to get you up to 2x zoom and 10x digital zoom. The sensors allow portrait mode photos, which can be edited after taking the photo as well, which is great. When using the camera, it doesn't overheat like current iPhones do, and this is still a problem on my 15 Pro Max even today. And even taking video up to 4K 30 frames per second looks surprisingly good. I think the camera is the most important part for a lot of people, and I think this genuinely can take good photos. You know, obviously not as good to match the 15 Pro Max lineup, but still good enough to be happy with in 2024, if you know what you're doing. An app that I've been using while testing the iPhone XS Max is today's sponsor, Documents. Documents is essentially a multi-tool for Apple devices. Take an easy-to-use file manager, then add in advanced features that let you edit PDFs, edit audio, transcribe audio or video, and convert files directly on your phone. I've been using it to create this script and review contracts and PDFs. I love that there's so much flexibility to highlight, draw, or comment, which helps me make an extremely organized video. I've said this before on the channel, but I've always thought the one thing missing from iOS and iPadOS was a proper file manager, and I genuinely think Documents fixes the problems that I had with files. There is a free version of Documents, but using the link in my description, you'll get 1 month of Documents Plus plan for free. I highly recommend Documents as a way to enhance the iOS and iPadOS experience. So we've talked about all the positives, but obviously using a phone from 6 years ago is going to have some downsides. And it really did. Like in daily use of this phone, everything all around was way slower than the 15 Pro Max. There's something to be said about a much slower refresh rate, making it seem less responsive. But even more than that, open an app, you have to wait. Even if it's just Twitter or X, even if you just had an app open and you're going back to it again, there's this delay that is just so clearly difficulty keeping up with newer apps. Second, the storage is low and can't even be expanded that high. On the low end, you're getting 64 gigs up to a max of 512 gigs. I set it up using a backup from my 15 Pro Max and ended up maxing out the storage immediately. So in 2024, 64 gigs really just isn't enough. And both of these issues are really only an issue if you're moving from a newer model down to this phone, but something that everyone will notice is the battery, which is bad. In my time with this phone, I was barely able to last to the end of the day. I kept trying to test different things and staying away from certain apps like TikTok that would drain the battery faster, and then still having problems. At one point, I just left the phone alone for a day without picking it up, and I found that by the end of the day, it drained up to 60% each day without any use, which is just crazy. Now what that tells me is that this phone just isn't optimized to support modern apps in the way that we're used to on newer phones. And this means that in order to use this phone, you need to A, be somebody who doesn't use their phone that often, or B, stays away from battery draining apps completely. But that brings me to the next problem, which is charging. Hello, old friend. This phone supports the lightning cable, which charges at 18 watts, 0 to 100 in about an hour, or you can use wireless charging, not MagSafe, but just standard Qi charging to charge at 7.5 watts. I do notice that the phone gets quite warm when charging, which tells me that this is a bit of a recipe for disaster, because if your phone is draining quickly, and then you need to charge it more often, and then it's heating up while charging, this means your battery will deplete faster, and within a year or two, your maximum battery capacity could be majorly drained, which isn't good news if you're buying this phone with the intention of keeping it long term. So there was a point in this test with the XS Max where I just said, okay, this is an older phone, fine. Battery and performance is going to be an issue with newer, more updated apps. So what if we make it into a minimal phone and really just simplify things? There's this app called Dumb Phone, which is kind of exactly what you want if you are simplifying your phone. It basically takes your phone from this to this, simplifying the home screen with plain text, basic black and white theme, all in all, really simple. In the app, you can select all the apps that you want and you can add custom labels. Then it creates this widget that you can add to your home screen. Then you can use wallpaper it provides to tie it all together for this sort of minimal look. And this does a couple of things for a phone like this. Number one, it cuts down on all of the vibrant colors it would typically need to generate and takes advantage of that OLED display. Two, it makes the phone a little less tempting with less vibrant colors, which means that you're less likely to open apps frequently, cutting down on usage and cutting down on battery consumption. It also helps me lead a more minimal life overall, and it makes my phone a little less overwhelming to the point that I waste less time on my phone. There's definitely a case to be made about using something like this on a smaller phone like the 13 mini, and I might actually do a longer video about how that's the perfect pairing. But overall, this is the type of layout that I would use on a phone like this of this age with this performance to get the most out of it. So like I said at the beginning of the video, you don't need the latest iPhone, but do you need this one? After using the phone steadily for the last month, the verdict is a bit surprising. I wanted to answer whether this phone could still work in 2024, and technically that answer is yes, but the benefit of choosing a phone like this over something like the SE is the full-size screen and the removal of the home button, and if that's the goal, I can't help but think that there's better options out there like the 12 or 13 Pro Max that you'll find refurbished or in the used market. And at the slightly higher price point of one of those has a much bigger boost in tech and performance, plus you're future-proofing yourself a little longer, as this is the oldest iPhone Max model that you can buy right now with iOS 18 support. While this is an absolutely beautiful phone, and one that still works great today for consuming video with an OLED screen, packing modern tech like Face ID for unlocking, and a large 6.5-inch form factor, for most people, it just won't be your best choice in 2024.